Good evening. Hey, it's me, Ashley. I'm going to tell another scary story today, as I am off to do, or will be off to do in the future. It's just the third one, so it's oft is maybe excessive. Regardless, let's find the story. I didn't bookmark it. I had a bookmark and everything. Let's see. Where were we? And this time it really will be from the Penguin Book of Vampire Stories. Penguin. Penguin. Where was that story? And what was it? Ah, here we go. Page 441. In case you have this book and want to read along, I suppose. Ah, there's the bookmark. It just fell inside. This story is by Charles L. Grant, and it is entitled Love Starved. You really think I'm that different, do you? Oh, I know you meant it as a compliment, don't worry. But seeing as how we've known each other for so long now, I'll give you your due, and a warning at the same time that you won't believe a word of it. And I won't mind if you laugh, or raise an eyebrow or two. As a matter of fact, I'll be disappointed if you don't. I'm a fair man, or in my case, trans woman, but I'm going to keep reading from the perspective of the person who wrote it. It's a story, you know that. I think, and you really should know that what you're getting yourself into. No, of course I'm not trying to break tomorrow's engagement. But as I said, I'm a fair man. Can't you see it in my eyes? So, where should I begin? With a woman, I suppose. Though I hope you won't be jealous. It's all very pertinent. Believe me, it is. What it comes down to, I think, is that I remember Alicia Cho. Not because of the experience we shared, but because it was she who stopped me from even dreaming about marriage again, or about love in the sense you wouldn't ordinarily consider it. This is, again, I'm reading the story for the first time, so I'm sorry if I fumble a bit. Unrequited passion? I hardly think so, though I've considered it. That's true. That sounds too much like a line from a grade B 1940s film, though if I were pressed, I would have to admit that in a grotesquely perverse way, I may love her yet, or part of me does anyway. But that's the one thing I can't explain just now. I'm not even sure that I'll ever have the answer. The attraction certainly wasn't her astonishing, almost exquisite beauty. I told you not to be jealous. Be patient. Though that, too, lingers. Rather like an aftertaste, uncommitted to being either sweet or sour. And if that sounds odd to say in this day and age, it's because she herself was a strange one. In a way, only someone like myself can truly appreciate. As of this moment, to be frank, I honestly cannot think of exactly what it was about her that affected me at first, despite the apparent simplicity of the problem. But then, perhaps, I'm still too close to the situation after 10 short years. Tell you what, let's turn this into a game of sorts. You order yourself another one of those pink things. None for me, thanks. Perhaps later. And we'll pretend we're in one of those 19th century country inns, whiling away the winter evenings, scaring the hell out of each other with nonsensical ghost stories. I haven't much time, but I think I can give you a hint of what's happening. Not that I expect you'll take it. No one ever does. Which is odd, my dear, because it's not only happening to me. If you'll remember, it was a remarkably short time before the photography studio I'd opened downtown was doing extremely well for its rather limited size. Over the first few months, I'd been commissioned to shoot cover material for just about every men's and general circulation magazine going. There were even a few location trips to Europe, thrown in to sweeten the lot. But when July came around, I felt myself going stale. My head was beginning to feel groggy in the same way you feel when you're just completed 2 or 3 final exams in a row. Every model was getting that same vapid, hurry up you creep, these lights are hot look. Every location was flat and uninviting. I dreaded going to work, dreaded even waking up in the morning. And naturally, all this eventually surfaced in the final product. I had obviously been pushing too hard, too fast, trying to make a few bucks and a name. Finally, when the very thought of sticking my eyes anywhere near a lens made me want to gag, I said hell with it and I left. Oh, a few clients squealed and wrung their hot little hands. A few editors growled at me over the phone. But when I told them in the plainest, non-advertising language what they could do with their precious campaigns and covers, all they did was purse their lips and shake their heads and tell me I needed a vacation. So I took one. Simple as that. I packed a bag and fled the city without looking back. It had been some time since I had bothered driving with it top down. The wind cresting over the windshield felt absolutely great, just cool enough to take the sting out of the hot sun, and strong enough to make me feel glad I still had all my hair. Everything then, and every miserable working day was blown so far away, I had to think to remember what I did for a living. Knowing me as you do, you're not going to believe this, but I was even singing out loud at the top of my voice, and thinking I should have practiced for the Met. Whim chose my direction, and I paid little attention to the odometer, gladly patching a tire or two myself, simply because there was no appointment I had to make by 2 o'clock, or we'll cancel the contract and find someone more reliable. Thank you. God, but that was a magnificent feeling. On the second morning out, in fact, I'd stuffed my watch into the glove compartment and didn't put it on again for 3 days. It's almost supernatural, the freedom one feels when you don't turn your wrist every 10 minutes to see that every 10 minutes have passed since the last time you looked. Incredible and wonderful. But then, by hook, crook, or some other heavy-handed and cliché-scarred beck of fate's temptation, I found myself missing a few familiar comforts and ended up back in the Cape Cod I'd bought over there on Hawthorne Street, right on the river above the bend. Yep, that was the sentence. I guess I had it in the back of my mind all along, in spite of the fact that my conscious plan was to keep driving until I'd refueled. You should pardon the pun. I'd picked it up already furnished, but I'd never had a chance to really enjoy the overstuffed chairs and the dusty bookcases, the stereo, the TV, and God knew what else. I'd seldom stayed there more than just to sleep, and sometimes not that, if you know what I mean. But now, Lord, I could roam through the cool and quiet, let the old place soak out of my system everything the drive in the country hadn't banished. I turned myself into the absolute sloth, and I loved it. Every minute. Even fell in love with the shadows in the house. Though I wasn't used to taking things easy, I had no problem at all falling into the slow, casual tempo of summer neighborhood life. Early evening walks, really seeing the place where I'd chosen to live, scuffling leaves in the park, and listening to bandstand music after a leisurely cooked dinner. Once even stringing a hammock between 2 trees in the yard, and humming in time to the river that marked the end of my lot. It was beautiful, because for I don't know how many campaign days, I was actually seeing things through my own eyes instead of a camera's, and I was totally convinced I couldn't have been happier. Then, one afternoon, I was baking in a sauce of suntan oil on a small section of riverbank set aside as a beach. I spent a lot of good time watching the kids splashing around, dunking each other, and really getting frustrated learning to swim in the river's moderate currents. For a while there, I really got involved, rooting for one little guy who was experimenting holding his breath and trying not to drown at the same time. I was timing him by counting thousands, and making bets with myself when this indescribable pair of legs blocked my view. Now I know that some men are devotees of the décolletage, and others are, as one of my girls once put it, admirers of ass, but I prefer those anatomical delights that carry the rest of the woman around. It has always been my solemn creed that bust or buttock, nose or navel, aren't anything at all without a fine pair of legs to support them. Not that this woman didn't have the appropriate accessories, mind you, but Lord, those legs. All the Troys in history would have gladly fallen for them, would have definitely been signed by the rest of her. Singed by the rest of her, excuse me. He's getting quite carried away with her. It's cute. Curiously, she was wearing a one-piece bathing suit that would have aroused attention on any beach simply because it was so out of place. It was quaint. Black, too, her hair, curled inwardly slightly at the ends, and cut to a point between her shoulders. Why is a one-piece so weird to this guy? One piece is whatever. Doesn't matter. I lay there quietly, waiting for her to turn around, and paradoxically hoping that she would stay facing the water. But she turned, abruptly, and looked straight into my eyes, as I do now, so I can see you're not jealous. Disconcerted though I was, her stare wasn't at all unfriendly. She was Eurasian, so temptingly French, perhaps. Using a word that I do not approve of. I may find myself disliking Charles L. Grant by the end of this. She was Eurasian, so temptingly French, perhaps, or tantalizingly Oriental. Perhaps. He doesn't even know, but he's just whatever. That a dozen years concentration couldn't have discovered where one began and the other left off. Oh my god. Dude, you just gotta... This is just part of reading horror anthologies. Some people have really shitty biases, and you judge them. You judge the authors is what you do. You judge the hell out of them. Undeterred, when I sat up, she knelt directly in front of me and smiled, her deep tan looking darker in the shadow of her lips. I felt a bit fuzzy, as if I hadn't too much sun and beer. As if I'd had too much sun and beer, but I managed a weak grin in return. Obviously, I wasn't the top of my form. I think that might be the top of his form. He hasn't struck me as charming so far. I'm sorry, I said, thinking all the while how brilliant that sounded and how stupidly 17-ish I was feeling. Okay. For what? She laughed, clear into eyes, perfectly framed by black bangs. You got me. For staring at you, I guess. It's not exactly the most polite form of introduction. It's not. It's really not. She laughed again, tossing her head from side to side. And damned if I didn't feel shocked at myself. Rather, at that moment, I wanted... Whoa. You know what? This guy is just making reference to sexual assault. That's just delightful. And, you know, it's not complimentary. Ever. Ever. To suggest that one is thinking of that. And I'm just going to skip that sentence. Sorry if you're bugged that I'm omitting parts and just judging the hell out of this author, but I'm going to go as far as I can with this, and hopefully this guy gets killed by a vampire. Oh no, wait, he's alive at the end because it's framed with him telling a story. That's disappointing to me. I know you know me well enough to understand that I'm not one to get upset over an occasional erotic impulse, but the sheer force of that woman had to be felt to be believed. Yeah, blame her for your weird rapey thoughts. That's great. And while I was smothering in this sense overload trance, she covered her mouth with silver-painted nails and swung around on her heels until she was resting on the grass beside me, which is how we spent the rest of the afternoon. Seduction without words. She made the right choice not talking to you. Except, most of the time I tried to stay just a few inches behind her, to avoid her eyes. You want to stare at her and not be looked back at. Wow. I'm gonna look you up after this, Charles L. Grant. Alicia Cho, eyes brown-black, with a single gold fleck in each just off-center. And when I finally introduced myself, she said, "Carol is an odd name for a man, isn't it?" Her voice was less a purr than a growl lurking beneath thin velvet. "Your father must have been a very handsome man." It's a weird compliment, Alicia. The touch of her hand on my knee, thigh, shoulder, the gentle way she brushed my back was colder than the lotion she rubbed absently onto my skin. Cobra and mouse. Men having really aggressive thoughts and then acting like women flirting is the too aggressive thing. That's... Again, you're a charmer, aren't you? Once, she kissed the back of my neck, and I nearly grabbed a mirror from a passing woman to see if I'd been branded. Everyone smiled at us. The adults at me, the children at her. What a handsome couple, I knew they were thinking. It was only natural, then, that I asked her to dinner. She wouldn't tell me where she was staying. A wise precaution for a woman alone. Yeah, that's a good idea. Don't tell this guy where you live. But promised to meet me at my place at 7. We parted and I ran. You're laughing, but I did. I ran home and stood in front of the bedroom mirror, thinking that all that had happened was far too good to even be remotely true. I scowled at my reflection. Too much hair for a smallish head, eyes too blue, nose too long and too sharp, ears too close to my head. No leading man, that was for certain, and thus no physical reason why Alicia should clasp me so suddenly to her not insubstantial bosom. I laughed aloud. My God, Carol, I said to myself, you've been picked up. You've actually been picked up by a raving nymphomaniac. Really? You don't know that, and that's not... Again, these are not complimentary descriptions. A psychotic murderess, I hope. But she's not going to kill him because he's alive at the end. Disappointed. I couldn't have cared less. She was elegantly available, and I was on vacation. What I hadn't planned on, of course, was falling in love. And that is the wrong place to laugh, my dear. It was marvelous, right out of Hollywood, magnificent, and terrifying. If I'd listened to myself then, I wouldn't be telling you this now. So she came, and we drove to the Riverbank restaurant in a hotel in the next town, dined and danced, and stood on the balcony that faced the water. I kissed her cheek, felt giddy with the wine, kissed her lips, and when it was over I was drained, so drained that I had to lean against the marble railing to keep from collapsing. For 1 second, hardly worth mentioning then, I hated her. Then it was over, and we headed back to my home. There had been no innuendo conversation. The slight turn of her mouth, the graceful flow of her hand spoke for her. The slight turn... This guy is throwing me off with all of his just Like the weird things that apparently go through some guys' heads. She never asked about my job, family, income, or Taylor. Hey, I myself had been too stunned by what I thought was instant love to mumble even hello and look wonderful, and you look wonderful, and why don't we dance? I never felt the pain that lanced my will. Neither do I remember the drive back to the house, the opening of the door, the walk upstairs. I couldn't help but feel as if the world had wound down to slow motion, so languid her movements, so careful the display of her smile and her charm. She sat on the edge of the bed and gestured towards the chair I kept by the nightstand. Drink? Why not, I thought. Get bombed, Carol. But let's get on with whoever is raping who. Just a massive creep, this guy. Although I can't blame her for going home with him. Whomst among us? Of course, I said. Mixed what she asked, and finally, at last, she let me sit down. We toasted each other, and I loved her again. Then her gaze narrowed over the top of the champagne glass, and I realized with a start how I had spent most of the afternoon avoiding those eyes, all the evening losing myself in them. But when, as an experiment in masculine control, I tried to break away, I couldn't, and my palms became unaccountably moist. Unaccountably moist. Carol is a strange name, she said. You've already said that once, I said, grinning stupidly. It was my dear departed mother's idea, not knowing what she would have at the time, and not feeling like coming up with two sets for the sexes. The two of them, I guess. I love you, strange name, she whispered. Not a word out of place, not a change in tone. Something broke briefly through the sparkling cloud I felt over me, but I couldn't put a name to it, and so I shrugged it away. Instead, I emptied the glass and set it on the floor beside me, cleared my throat, and said, This is going to sound, well, it's going to sound ridiculous under the circumstances, Alicia, but damn it, I think I love you too. It was all so bloody serious, so intolerably solemn, that I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't. I was too nervous, not of breaking the spell that nights and champagne and mysterious women weave, but of her and those eyes with their single flecks of gold. Telling this guy you love him is not a great plan. He obviously takes things way too seriously. For how long, strange name? Shouldn't that be obvious? Forever. How else? Lots of other ways. It can be short term. It's fine. That shouldn't bug you. It was she who laughed then, deeply, in her throat. I laughed also. Ha ha, ha ha, I laughed. And as she did, I became inexplicably angry. Every time she, makes an overture, he reacts with rage. And every time she, does something to, appeal to him, he thinks about assault. I really hope she's like a vampire or something, because she clearly needs something to defend herself. Didn't she know, I demanded of myself, that in 34 goddamn years on this road, I had said that only once before, when I'd meant it, to a cheerleader in high school, who had also laughed, but loudly and shrilly, with her head thrown back and her eyes rolled heavenward in total disbelief. Strange name, love me, Alicia said. I hesitated. I stalled. Her request became a demand, and I did, and am now regrettably forced to resort to the old purple prose lines of jungle passions and animal ferocity. But that, I'm afraid, is exactly the way it was. Stripped, perspiring, even before we began, stalking each other without benefit or cinematic love play. Manual directions of foreplay and stimulation. Sheets and blankets were literally torn. Glasses were shattered, bottles smashed. Again and again and again. Love me, she hissed. And I did. Bleeding, drying blood, bruised and bruising, again and again. More, she crooned. I did. God, I did. Dawn, and I did not see it. Dusk, and I could not see it. Crying, laughing, a haze of cigarette smoke, a wastebasket gushing, uneaten meals one of us made downstairs in the kitchen. The wastebasket was gushing uneaten meals? It's a weird choice of descriptive word there. Charles has writing issues as well as issues with women. It must have been her. I couldn't have moved. Of course you made her cook. We stood by the window in caftan robes and watched the river pass, a beautifully bright day beneath us, beneath the willows. It was peaceful and wonderful. I held her gently against my chest and told her so, whispering in her ear all the idiot love phrases that men think original when the loving is done. Then love me, she whispered back. The radio played Brahms and Vaughan Williams. Nothing louder for this room on this day at this time. Love me, she sang. I told her how, when I was in college, up there in Hartford, I had exhausted myself during one summer vacation, visiting 10 European cities in less than 16 days. I must have been drunk when I said it. I don't remember now. But I suddenly turned mawkish and sentimental, muttering, "Those were the good old days," over and over again, and phrasing their lack of tears and responsibility, and extolling my love for them in dreams and bursts of unbidden nostalgia. I told her about an Irish setter I once had, how he could never go with us on vacation because he always got carsick and had to stay at the vet's. About the cheerleader, about the models, about the slices of my soul that went into my work. Love me, she comforted. Everything is relative, said the speeding turtle to the snail. There must have been time someplace, but 2 days were gone before I first began to think that I was losing my mind. Alicia was sleeping at my side, peacefully, evenly. My mouth was burlap, my head cement. God, dear God, how everything ached. For one nauseating moment, I thought of a morning a couple years back when I'd eaten tainted food in a Boston fast food joint, and they used a foul stomach pump while I was semi-conscious. A fool stomach pump. Does this mean to say food? Is this a typo? Is this a fool stomach pump? A stomach pump specifically for fools. I groaned and pushed myself up on my elbows, looking for a mirror to see if, in fact, I was really turning into an airless balloon. But a pain I knew instantly was frighteningly abnormal flattened me, like a hammer, and I had to gasp for breath. Beyond that, however, I felt nothing. I registered the room and what I could see through the window, but there was nothing left inside me to hang the pictures on. Ah, yes, that trope of men feeling drained of their power by women and sex and blaming them and ascribing some monstrous form or hidden agenda based on it. We're really sinking into the misogyny now. That, I think, is when the terror began, as if I were suffering a malaria attack, I simultaneously grew cold and soaked the sheets with a bath of perspiration that made me tremble. And I grew still more terrified when I tried to cry out with that slow-growing pain. And a mind said there was no reason, and my mouth made no sound. I fell asleep then, unwillingly, and I dreamt as I do now, in blacks and grays and splashes of sterile white. And once in that dream, I heard someone mention food, and I heaved dryly for 10 minutes before I could fall asleep again. The last thing I recall seeing as I was floating the last thing I recall seeing was a floating, broken camera. I woke once more. I think it was daylight. I really don't know because Alicia was bending over me, her lips parted and smiling. "Can you love me, strange man? Strange name?" she asked, carelessly tracing a meaningless pattern from my chest to my stomach to my groin and back. "My God, Alicia, can you love me?" she insisted. "My God, no!" She pouted, through a smile that told me she knew better. "Alicia, please, you don't love me anymore?" A fleeting array of artfully shadowed images of Alicia in her gown, the swimsuit, the robe, her nakedness, atavistic in the arousal it produced, all made me smile lazily until I turned my head and saw and looked in her eyes. In that final moment, before she smiled again, I knew at last what I had been trying to avoid. Alicia was still hungry, and she kissed me hard before I finally passed out. So then, before you tell me what you think, my dear, let me tell you what I think you've already decided. Let's see. Maybe I'm simply crazy, right? Too easy, and probably accurate. Perhaps that it's a fantasy, cleverly manipulated to hide a disastrous affair. Or perhaps, better yet, perhaps I had become so drunk at dinner that I was physically incapable of playing the Don Juan in anything more than in high-sounding words, thus striking myself low with a sordid, simple trauma. Or you're just old and blaming a young woman who tired you out for you being old, which, like, it's okay to be old and get tired. And, she probably had fun wearing you out and lording it over you a little bit. And that's cool. She should get to do that. Just give her that and don't look for a supernatural response. She's probably not a vampire. She's probably just lucky you got tired because you're weirdly possessive. I was right, wasn't I? Probably wrong. Well, it all sounds very intelligent, I admit. All very up-to-date and properly sophisticated. In fact, if I didn't have to hurry along right now, you might even have convinced me, given enough time. But I really must run, as I warned you at the start. And, for heaven's sake, stop worrying about my health. I'll promise you now, if you like, that I'll dine without fail later this evening. My darling, you are jealous, aren't you? But you know me, first things first, so please don't worry. I won't forget. You see, there's this wonderfully attractive brunette named Claire who's dying to see the river from my bedroom. Look, why don't you have another drink on me, and I'll see you tomorrow. I've worked up a marvelous appetite talking with you, and Claire is waiting for me right at this moment. I think you'd like her. She's a wonderful girl, a great girl. She thinks the gold in my eyes is sexy. She loves me, she really does. But just so you'll know that I will keep my promise, lean over here and I'll give you a kiss. One kiss, that's all. One kiss. I'm hungry. So I think we're supposed to, like, deduce that this girl who he had a weird racial fetish about was a sex vampire and now he's a sex vampire. But I think he just kind of showed up in the bedroom and is now looking for opportunities to prove himself. And hopefully this, what was her name? Claire girl? Hopefully she, like, also didn't tell him where she lives, like the other girl did. That was smart on her part. Well, that was a story, and I read it to you. And I'm a little sorry that I did. I hope you'll accept my apology, because you know what? It's just part of what's going to happen. Some of these stories are going to be terrible, or even hateful, and we will examine that and talk about it, and I will complain. Oh, how I will complain. But that's part of what's great about short horror, is people don't have a lot of time to, like, the writers, I mean, don't have a ton of time to disguise their biases and hide what they are. They're trying to get to the point, and maybe the point that comes across to readers like myself isn't what they intended, but we gain an understanding. We learn about all kinds of things, and really all genres are capable of displaying this bias and this hatred. I prefer encountering it in horror, because in comedy or in drama or in romance, there's so much room to hide it in niceness and kindness. But when someone's trying to scare you, you get an idea about what scares them. And Charles L. Grant is afraid of women, and he's afraid of appearing to be weak and impotent. And he fantasizes of a woman who won't talk to him, but will cure him of any weakness or lack of sexual prowess and make him feel young. And that's a sadly common theme that you will run into reading the writing of men. So, we've had a story, and we've had a little discourse, I guess. I do actually have a recommendation today. I usually do, and I do now. I just started watching Housing Complex C. It's available on HBO Max, and it's a very Lovecraftian horror anime. I love some horror anime, and I've only seen 3 episodes of this so far. I think that's all that's out, but it's good. It really clings to the sort of Cthulhu mythos, but without falling into a lot of the bad, hateful traps. Speaking of hateful male writers, H.P. Lovecraft. Wow, that guy's a fucked up monster. But this show takes the things that are good about his writing and dissects and tries to counter the things that are harmful in his writing. And I appreciate that, and I love some gruesome, mysterious horror, and that's exactly what this is. God. Really, everyone on the internet at some point needs to take some time to, like, tell you once again that H.P. Lovecraft was fucked up. And, like, I know you've heard it a million times, and you probably feel like it's cliche, but I think everyone should do it just as a duty. If you speak publicly about horror, you should let everyone know that H.P. Lovecraft is a racist creep. Just because, like, if you don't say that, it leads people to wonder whether or not you might be one. Like it's a good litmus test. H.P. Lovecraft. Racist creep? Checkmark? Yeah, you agree? Good. Good. You hit the baseline of barely understanding how to be decent. Well, Penguin Book of Penguin Vampire Stories, you have clearly upset me today, but I will probably give you another chance sometime in the future. You don't deserve this purple star today. You don't. Whatever. It's been fun. Stay spooky.